have already been adopted in over 40 states and a couple of territories in the U.S. They were standards that were developed through the National Governors Association, as well as the chief state school officers, meaning the superintendents of states' departments of education. And what they did, it was really a process that was very much participatory, if you will. There were numerous drafts that were developed, and individuals from different types of associations, be it the Mathematical Association, Language Arts, were participating in actually providing some type of input into these standards. What's critically important about them is that now we have one set of standards that most states have adopted because they consider for them to actually be putting us on a path that really helps our students graduate with the type of skills that are required to succeed in college education. Before this, we had different state standards, right? So each state developed their own standards, and it really was all over the map. The only common indicator we had to really see how kids were doing across the country was NAEP, the National Assessment of Education Progress. But that, you couldn't really even get district by district information on those. Those are state indicators unless you participate in TUDA, which was really only meant for urban districts. And even at that, it's not that many, maybe at 20 at most. What was also true is, especially with the advent of NCLB, happening in a lot of states is that they were actually lowering their standards. And in part was because there was a lot of punitive aspects to NCLB, where if you didn't meet a standard, you would have found that you didn't meet AYP, and therefore you would actually then be dinged, if you will. What's happening, though, is with Common Core, we're not really looking at a lowering of standards. You're actually looking at very rigorous standards that everybody is saying, okay, we agree on that. And why is it? This is the other point I really want to make. The way they were developed, there was a lot of research that was done. And if you go to the Common Core website, you will be able to look at the research that was used. They benchmarked the standards using some of the international benchmarks, looking at some of the countries that are doing very well, for example, in mathematics. How is it that students learn mathematics, and what topics are taught? How deep do they go? How wide do they cover the topic? So that was the other piece. But in particular for ELLs, I'm really excited about this. And I must say that a lot of us are very excited about it, but also a lot of us are very nervous. So it's really a double-edged sword. When these standards were developed, there was no explicit discussion about English language learners. And a number of folks, advocates for ELLs, were very upset about that. But the authors are very purposeful in that. If you read the documents, they do mention them, and they do talk about students with disabilities. But they do so really saying these standards are meant for everybody. We're not going to have special standards for ELs, and we're not going to have special standards for students with disabilities. Every kid has to be able to meet these standards. And I think that's a really strong and important message. However, where it really starts becoming important is in implementation. So now that you start looking at, okay, how are school districts going to do this? How are you going to recalibrate the instructional materials? What do teachers need to know to teach ELs to the Common Core? That's where it really starts becoming an issue, and it's something that everybody is struggling with. There are a number of good folks out there that are working on this. You have, we're working in our own districts to support our districts doing the work, but there's also folks like Understanding Language, which is an initiative out of Stanford, funded by the Gates Foundation and Carnegie. What's important is that the expectation that we were talking about really has to be there for all the students. And for ELs, unfortunately, we've had some lowering of expectations. If you look at the materials that a lot of ELs get when they're in school, they are not on grade level. They are not as rigorous as English-speaking kids get. So this becomes an anchoring point for me, and I think for those of us that have hope in this, is that it's really calling for raising the expectations for ELs. First, I would say become familiar with them. It's they're not too lengthy, but they're pretty thick. Become familiar with them. In terms of language, there's several dimensions. It's about reading and writing and listening and speaking and argumentation. And I think you really need to understand what is being asked of the student, but also then the teacher, right, and what you need to teach. There's also, in terms of mathematics, there are notions about mathematical progressions. How do you take students from one very critical concept that then are used to build on for the next one? Those are going to be very, very critical. There's also language across the disciplines. And I think all too often what we've done right now is we've isolated language development to be about English language arts. And now people need to become familiar and comfortable, because how can you teach something if you're not comfortable with teaching language in the context of sciences, in the context of math, in the context of social studies or social sciences? I mean, this is, I don't think it's something that's entirely new. For practitioners that have been working with language, it just means that they're going to have to broaden the application of what they've been doing already with ELTS. I am excited because there's room for redefining the role of English language development, ESL, whatever you might call teachers that have worked with ELLs in their language development. This is an opportunity to really have your skills and knowledge shine, but they have to be sharpened in terms of Common Core. But you have the foundation. You know how language works. And if you don't know exactly, then you need to go, brush up on that. But you know why language is important to build.